check. Hey everyone, my name is Hamdee Khader. I am the co-founder of Devo Protocol DAO, which stands for Decentralized Volunteering. Melissa, thank you so much for having me today. Isaac, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hamdee. Obviously, Devo Protocol is changing the world as we know it when it comes to volunteering and giving power back to the people. So the voice of the people matters, especially when it comes to blockchain technology. And Hamdee and all of the other team members of Devo Protocol have changed how volunteer organizations, donors, and volunteers get rewarded within the blockchain space. So when you think of yourself joining an organization, whether it's a nonprofit organization or anything you can think of, Divo is changing how that happens. Traditional nonprofits spend millions and millions of dollars and waste it on administrative costs, scams, all these different things, right? Hamdee is going to explain to you guys of how Devo Protocol is changing how decentralized volunteering is coming back to the people. So your voice, not only as a volunteer, as a community member, or as somebody that is coming into the ecosystem, your voice is gonna matter. So Hamdee, whenever you're ready, brother, take it away.
All right, sounds great.
So I'm just gonna thank you so much. It's our first session, so I'm happy to start with with an amazing project that have a lot of implication for many projects. So I just want to go through the format a little bit. So we're gonna have 5 to 7 minutes presentation of the actual problem and your solution and how they implement it on chain, basically your own chain approach. And if you can give us a little bit about like, how did it evolve? How did you actually come to pose this question? And then some real life examples, like how do you want to start to implement the solution? And what do you expect in terms of the transformation of the market industry? And then a couple of minutes, I would love you to self-assess the impact areas and factors. What are the expected results when it's applied in various real-life cases? And then we're going to have the Q&A, and it's going to be more open discussion. And then we can just wrap it up with some sort of an interim report and final remarks. Thank you so much. We're listening to you, Hamdee.
All right, awesome. Sounds great. And let me put this right here. Cool. So Devo Protocol, Decentralized Volunteering. The philanthropy sector is a $2.3 trillion economy. But unfortunately, that value is not monetized, which leads to the sector suffering from numerous long-standing inefficiencies. For instance, volunteers are not rewarded for their time. People don't know exactly where their money is going. Nonprofit organizations face high administrative costs, leading to lower amount, like a small number of dollars going to marginalized individuals. Thus, what Devo Protocol does is that it's a decentralized value ecosystem that will tokenize this economy, which ultimately relieves the sector of these inefficiencies, all by creating trust-based interactions between every single party, whether it's a volunteer organization, marginalized individual, or corporate entities. And this is all achieved utilizing it through a decentralized autonomous organization, decentralized finance, and NFTs. But first and foremost, as they always say, if a strong project always has to have a strong team. So I'm just going to go over a bit of the team members a little bit. For example, we have people like Morten Rangard, who is a pioneer in the NFT space. Contracting with people like Floyd Mayweather. Then we also have Peter Mikkelsen, who's actually the co-founder of one of the largest blockchain nonprofits in Europe. And then we have, of course, the Isaac Wilson, the master himself, who has a lot of experience in the blockchain realm. For example, he was a director at the Bitcoin Center in Miami, working under Nick Spanos. So going back to my initial to what I said initially, but analyzing the market. So I initially said that the volunteering market is $2.3 trillion. That is a lot of money, but unfortunately, since it's not monetized, people don't normally realize that. And then you find there are some bad players within this industry taking advantage of that. So for instance, just to so one can picture it, this the amount of volunteering that happens in the UK accounts for 1% of the GDP. Or in other terms, if you look at the US, in 2020 alone, 77.4 million men and women volunteered 6.9 billion hours. So due to the fact that this economy is not monetized, what exact inefficiencies exist? Well, every single stakeholder faces its own problems. For volunteers, not only are their hours unrewarded, but they're unrecorded and unverified. So, and this is a big problem for a lot of individuals, such as college students. Your average medical student has to volunteer 2,400 hours, right? But, how do they prove that they've actually volunteered this? What happens is what normally happens is they have to go to these large nonprofits who have these expensive systems that are able to record these hours, ultimately leading to those smaller nonprofits who don't have these resources, obtaining less volunteer help, and marginalized individuals who obviously don't have these systems, not obtaining any help at all, except if it's from these large nonprofits. Then you have donors who do not know where exactly their money is being spent, causing them to donate less, or corporate entities who don't really have a large motivation to enter this market due to the fact that their utmost objective is to increase shareholder value. And then you have volunteer organizations who face numerous inefficiencies such as high administrative costs when it comes to finding qualified and verified volunteers. Right now, when a volunteer organization wants to find a volunteer, what they do is they probably post a job ad on a third-party website, get hundreds of applications. After reviewing these applications, they then have to go and conduct interviews and then conduct background checks. These background checks are very, very, very expensive, especially when you're talking about conducting these checks across numerous volunteers. So how will Devo fix this issue? Specifically, we do this through three parts: the governance, funding, and trust-based interactions. Well, let me just start with the trust-based interactions. Ultimately, the way that we solve these inefficiencies is by every single stakeholder listed here, by verifying every single one of them, and by verifying their operations. These stakeholders can actually interact with each other in a trustless format, all verified via the blockchain. And I'll go into the later detail in how exactly that's done in the technical. But one of the technologies will be implemented is NFTs. So where every single person who's on this protocol, once they're verified, they get an NFT, which is a badge, which is actually sent to their email via magic link, and that shows that in terms of, let's say, a volunteer, that they're a verified, qualified Divo volunteer. And then you have the funding issues and the governance issues. So in relation to the funding issues, 33% of the tokens are staked in the liquidity in a locked liquidity pool, right? And then the reward tokens from those liquidity pools goes to the reward pools, and that's how the ecosystem is perpetually funded, because the DAO founders, because the token is a governance token, they get to vote on not only the entire ecosystem, which includes these reward pools and where it goes. So these reward tokens go to the top performing volunteer organizations within the DAO. They go to individual volunteers. In addition to that, they also can go to funding for the long-term funding of the DAO and growing of the ecosystem and rewarding themselves as well. So how does Devo, what inefficiencies does Devo solve? Well, for the volunteers, now they can have a proof that they actually have those volunteers and they get rewarded for it. So for instance, now instead of having to go volunteer for these large nonprofits because they have these systems, Devo will allow them to go volunteer directly with marginalized individuals and for smaller nonprofits, right? And have these hours actually verified via NFTs that goes into their wallet. In addition to the fact they'll be rewarded for their time. For donors, they will be able to see exactly where their money is going. instead of now just having to go and rely on very vague, you would call them annual statements or tax reports, which don't really provide that much information. And then you have corporate entities who now will actually have a lot of motivation to enter the philanthropy market. So one of the ways they would be able to do this is the fact that they'll be able to purchase services from the DAO. So since the DAO will have millions and millions of different users, from volunteers to donors to volunteer organizations, when they purchase stuff like advertising, they'll have to use that via the Divo token, which provides them to access to all these individuals. And in addition to that, since this is a philanthropy DAO, it increases their goodwill, which is one of the most important tangible assets that a company has. And then you have volunteer organizations, which what this does is it'll allow them to, for instance, the ability to obtain qualified and verified volunteers directly on the DAO. So what will happen is they log on to the decentralized application, they can see the qualified, verified volunteers that are there, and they just onboard them. There's no need for them to go through this strenuous process they have right now of posting this job ad and conducting these expensive background checks. So what are the notable technologies that are over here? Unlike a lot of other projects, we really wanted to show that this project can work instead of just saying that it will work on the white paper. We actually wanted to show that it does. So, some of the things that we've implemented already, despite us just starting the seed round, is that we've already implemented decentralized digital identity, which is the NFT. So as stated previously, when someone signs up on the protocol, whether they're a volunteer organization, or even a DAO founder, what happens is they automatically are given an NFT, which is minted, and the way we've done it is that it goes straight into their email via magic link. Now, why do we even go through the email process? The reason for that is that we wanted to let this protocol, be used by all stakeholders, not just those who are blockchain savvy. In addition to that, our smart contract is upgradable, which will be, so right now we're in Ethereum blockchain, but we are anticipating Ethereum 2.0, which has numerous advantages such as low gas fees, and which will be much more sustainable. But we've made our contract upgradable to provide us with that flexibility to switch chains or even go cross-chain. In addition to that, we have already built a DAO with snapshot governance, and we have a multi-signature wallet. And we are going to be building the locked liquidity pools, which will have 33% locked. Now, one of the things that really makes us stand out is the utility. So has there been volunteer-based crypto projects in the past? Yes, there has. But why don't we hear about them? The reason why we don't hear about them is that we differentiate ourselves twofold. One, because of the technological ecosystem that we have and that we will build, which is much more advanced than the previous ones. But two, utility. A lot of people like saving the world, and that's great, and that is a noble cause. But we have to understand also the fact that that the project in and of itself has to be sustainable. It has to create value. And that's the beauty of Divo does. It helps these marginalized individuals. It solves this, it provides a sector with numerous advantages, while simultaneously it rewards every single participant, whether you're a volunteer organization or a DAO founder who owns the token. So the utility, I like to basically split it into two parts: the governance and ownership, which include the reward pools, and also the contract and ecosystem fees. So let's start with the governance and ownership. As a Divo token holder, you have a governance token. You get to vote on proposals that affect the entire DAO, right? So let's start with future initiatives. If the DAO in the future wants to release NFTs, for instance, and wants to sell on OpenSea, as a hypothetical, you as a DAO founder can vote on that proposal and reap the possible benefits. Now, in relation to the reward pools and liquidity pools, as a DAO founder, you get to choose exactly where those reward tokens actually go. Now, in relation to the contract interactions and ecosystem transactions, most transactions that occur on this ecosystem will have an associated contract interaction associated with that. So, for instance, as previously stated, when a volunteer organization wants to go and onboard a volunteer, they'll have to pay a small transaction fee for that via Divo token, thus increasing the utility. They obtain that Divo token from the market. But in all honesty, that's not really a big factor for them because the cost will be so nominal in comparison to the amount of cost they pay right now. Simultaneously, if a corporation wants to join the DAO, they will also have to pay an ecosystem fee. Now, in relation contract interaction fee, in relation to the ecosystem transaction fee, that goes back to what I stated previously about corporations who want to purchase services from the ecosystem. They'll have to purchase that service via the DAO token. So it's kind of really similar to the basic attention model. So where are we currently at our roadmap? Well, we already formed the DAO. We have the multi-signature wallet and other technologies already set up. We have our core team, and we've brought in many different advisors from multiple different spaces, and we have expanded that team. Now we are full-fledged going into development and marketing and obtaining that initial funding. So a little bit more about the tokenomics. Overall, we have 600 million tokens with 402 million in initial token supply, circulating supply, because 33% is locked in liquidity. Now, one of the greatest things about, as stated previously, one of the greatest things about this project is the fact that we put a lot of emphasis into the technicals. And so, for example, the token economics model is not burning, but instead it is it's non-dilutive elastic rebasing. So what that is it's kind of like the number of tokens, instead of being burnt, they increase and decrease based on numerous factors such as demand and supply. Not only in the stock, what this does is not only does it ensure a consistent market, but in addition to that, what it does is it provides more rewards coming out of that locked liquidity pool. In addition, as stated previously, we have our contract is upgradable. Now, this just gives a bit more detail into the specific distribution of the raise. So the raise is split into 3 parts: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1, we're selling 10% of the token. Phase 2, we're selling another 10%. And then phase 3, we're selling 20%, priced at 10 cents, 20 cents, and 30 cents respectively, with 27% going to team and advisors, and 33% going into the locked pools. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Hamdee. That was actually really covering most of the questions we might come up. Well, yeah, I need to tell, it's quite impressive, but there are also like a lot of, just like you said, a lot of other rewarding, positive environmental action kind of initiatives. And in a couple of years, we don't get to hear from any of that, like the websites are from a couple of years ago. So one thing may be like, how do you plan to penetrate the volunteering space? Because most of these organizations are super inert, and it takes ages for anyone to take any innovative action, and it has a lot to do in terms of educating the people, and also there's the compliance sides. They're not really ready to get donations or anything like on crypto. How do you want to structure that side, basically?
Well, like all great ideas in the philanthropy market, and like all and basically with all initiatives, we start at the grassroots level, right? And I can answer your question in twofold, because that's our basically incorporated in our strategy. In relation to directly targeting volunteer organizations, we're starting at the grassroots level to speak with those smaller nonprofits who have less of an administrative barrier in relation to hierarchy. In addition to that, those are the nonprofits who really are suffering the most, right? They're the nonprofits who don't get that much the large influx of volunteers that your larger nonprofits do, due to their lack of system to track those volunteer hours. Those are the nonprofits who do not have that, are not able to have access to their large donor networks to provide them with funding. And those are the nonprofits, in addition to that, who would be more receptive to new ideas such as this, instead of just sticking to the status quo. In addition to that, the second part would be that we are really focusing on onboarding volunteers, right? And so because these volunteers are the ones that once you have a large number of volunteers, the volunteers organizations will join in, right? Because because without volunteers, a volunteer organization cannot exist. And so we obtain these volunteers, and we've noticed that the volunteers are just super excited about this project due to the fact that a lot of the barriers that normally would stop one from volunteering is eliminated by Divo. So, as stated previously, but just to go into more detail, their hours are verified and are rewarded. As a medical student, you have to volunteer 2,400 hours to get into school. That's an 8-month full-time job, right? So from a one standpoint, like I know this one person, for instance, who was trying to get into medical school, and he had his sick grandmother, who's living at his house. He could not go and volunteer for his grandmother and help them, right? But instead, he had to go to a large nonprofit to get his hours recorded, while his grandmother was staying at home with no help. How does that make sense? So what Divo does is that it will actually verify that he is a verified volunteer when he signs up on the network, right? Then he gets his NFT, his e-NFT. And then his grandmother would sign up on the network, and then she would get an NFT, an e-NFT. And then with the decentralized application, what it does is it allows those two individuals to easily connect with each other, right? Through the decentralized application. One of our main focus is to make it very easily accessible to people who are not only not blockchain savvy, but are not even tech savvy. And once they're able to connect with each other, and the dApp verifies the transaction that happens between them. So it verifies that X volunteer, in this case my friend, has volunteered for Y individual, which is his grandmother. And let's say 10 hours, for instance, in one time, when those 10 hours are verified, what happens is an oracle basically takes that from the smart contract, puts it, the oracle takes it from the decentralized application, puts in a smart contract, and the smart contract mints both an NFT that's basically going to be which is in addition to their verified that they already have, that's not transferable, but this NFT says that this person has volunteered for this person in need, and it also mints them and it also provides them with tokens, right? So that's where it comes the verification. In addition, that's where it comes the reward. And that's just one aspect of Divo, right? I can go on and on. They can start their own projects. They can become their own volunteer organization and get the same benefits as a normal VO over here. When I was starting projects like founding a statewide voter program in North Carolina, I registered 650 volunteers. One of the main barriers I had is I had a lack of resources, right? I've never started a volunteer organization. I don't have access to donors. But what this does is it eliminates those barriers, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. So as Isaac said at the very beginning, this gives power back to the people. And when you get the people involved, the organizations will follow suit.
That just made me think of it's a facilitator of the transition from a non-governmental organization volunteerism to non-organizational volunteerism, kind of more like civil acts that can facilitate any volunteerism and an impact-driven act, basically. But obviously, there are a couple of issues on how to assess an actual volunteerism. Like if I get my grandma to agree, or a couple of people to agree to sign up in the system, then am I verified? I mean, it's first look, it looks it's open to fraud, or how can I actually, how can Devo assess the real aspect, the reality of the actual volunteering, like if it's actually done, because if I can get some people convinced to sign my work hours, then it can be done, basically.
100%. So, and I love that you brought that up. And, this is why I love the Q&A portion, because, you can't, it's hard to really provide every single information in a pitch deck. So I love when I'm able to provide clarity on that. So I'm going to go to your volunteers. But I'm going to start with the volunteer organizations too, because I feel like it is also equally applicable to them. Individuals might be like, I got a couple of questions on how do you ensure that volunteer organizations who join the network are transparent, right? How do you ensure that how are you going to basically help these donors, right, who are giving these donations, not only deliver their donations and know where it's going, but also in addition to that, know that the volunteer organization is actually providing transparency, right? So first and foremost, Divo only accepts certain volunteer organizations to join. They have to meet a certain level of transparency, and their goals have to be a certain level of effectiveness in order to be able to join. Once they do join, what happens is they have to maintain certain reporting standards that they have to record on the DAO, right? In addition to that, what happens is because they are, one of their main, one of the main advantages for these volunteer organizations is obtaining funding from the DAO, specifically from the liquidity pools. They are going to be kind of competing with each other for this funding, right? So it's kind of like when they compete with each other, you're not talking about your business competition, but more so they're competing in terms of being of positive factors, like being more transparent, by being more effective, in order for the DAO founders to want to vote to provide these volunteer organizations who already have met a certain minimum requirement who have already met a certain minimum requirement to obtain that funding, right? So now in relation to the volunteers, in relation to that transaction that happens, we were thinking a lot about, how we're going to verify that transaction. And we wanted to actually show people that it is possible. So despite the fact that we're still in our seed round, we actually have a POC of that verification system through Persona that actually even though it's just a POC, actually it verifies that the person actually is who they actually say they are, right? And what that shows is the fact that if we can do that with with the minimum amount of funding that we had at the beginning, it is really possible on a large scale. And in our strategy, one of the ways we have listed multiple options. One of those options was being able to utilize the technologies that we currently have around us. So in this instance, it would be like the scanning mechanisms that you have in your phone, right? Instead of trying to instead of just trying to develop a whole new and utilize a whole new technology that's not there yet, utilize the technology that we currently have right now in order to verify that process. So in this instance, if in my previous example, right, that verified volunteer, goes to this marginalized individual, and they would have to, do like a biometric scan on the individual's phone. Now that's just one way of doing it. But ultimately what we're trying to do is make sure that verification system remains decentralized.
Okay, so it actually comes up with its own way to validate impact contribution to volunteerism. That's one of the biggest benefits. So how would it work, like in terms of the economics of the whole system before getting to the governance? For instance, I'm going to organize a beach cleanup. In terms of environmental aspect, okay, we have a certain goal that can be verified easily. I can prove it. That many people are going to join, or we're going to plant trees, or any kind of civil act. And should I provide liquidity in terms of like first assessing the value of this work hours that I expect from each participant, for instance, or how are we going to get into the ecosystem, getting everyone rewarded by Divo tokens? And because also you talk about the non-dilutive elastic supply, I just want to see whenever comes new people and new organizations, how to make sure that the whole thing is not inflationary, and how to protect the actual value. Should I mean, is there a fiat on and off ramp, or it's just going to create holders? And then how that parts work, like how the volunteers also can make use of their Divo tokens, and how does it actually reward them in terms of economy?
100%. I'm gonna try and remember and answer every one of those questions. But yeah, if I don't answer one of those, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But they're
kind
all
of
very
like a
important. I love it.
description of it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. No, so, all right. So to start at the outset of the volunteer organizations, right? And you know how it will kind of look like on the ground from a UI UX perspective. So let's say that, you know, you said that if somebody wants to clean a beach, so that's assuming that a volunteer is starting their own project. So I'm going to give the perspective of a volunteer organization, and then you're going to see how that relates to if a volunteer wants to start his own project. So if a volunteer organization wants to conduct a certain activity, what they do is that they, you know, first and foremost, that they put a proposal up on the DAO, right? If they want to obtain funding, they put a proposal up on the DAO, basically describing and they have to fill out preset fields describing exactly what the project is. Now, as previously stated, they want to obtain funding from this liquidity pool. So they're probably going to be motivated to provide more information than what is required to do so, right? Now, in relation to finding these volunteers, for instance, in order to help them, every single party on this in this ecosystem is verified, right? Is verified, and they have personal identifiers represents them on this ecosystem. So via the decentralized application, this volunteer organization is able to go on the DApp and then find, for example, volunteer A, B, and C around my area, right? And they know that they're verified, and they see their backgrounds, and they see, like, when I say verified, I mean verified as in, you know, that they have the experience that they state they have, right? And in addition to that, you know, if for the volunteer organization, if they're looking in relation to criminal background checks, and I can get into more detail later, how we're not trying to basically make it like if you have one criminal like if you have one criminal record, like you're banned out. No, that's not what we're trying to do. But you know, as a lot of the problems that volunteer organizations face is not only the background check, but if they don't conduct the background check, what happens is, you know, if somebody states they have 10 years of volunteer experience in doing a certain action, and they get that individual, and it turns out the individual doesn't really have that experience, that what leads to high turnovers. So the volunteer organization goes on the DApp, they find a volunteer that's qualified and verified, they obtain that volunteer, and they onboard them via the DApp, right? And then the volunteer sees that transaction from his side, he sees the volunteer organization and what they're doing, and he accepts that, right? And that can go vice versa. The volunteer organization can just say, hey, we're looking for volunteers instead of choosing one, and the volunteers will then go to them. So it's like a two-way transaction. In addition to that, that's the same way that corporate entities, if they want to facilitate or directly sponsor a project, they go on the DApp, they see the proposals, they can filter based on what they're basically interested in, and find the right volunteer projects in order to help sponsor that they know are given by qualified and verified volunteer organizations. And simultaneously, that's the same way with the donors. So when I previously said this facilitates trust-based interaction, it's because every one of these parties are qualified and verified, and that's what makes it trust-based. You don't have to trust the person. You don't have to conduct your own due diligence. You trust the ecosystem you trust the ecosystem in order to verify these individuals, and that and after they've been verified, that is represented via an NFT safely on the blockchain, right? So I hope that answered the first part of your question. Now, in relation to the second part of your question about the volunteers and being, and let me just add about that. like a volunteer, if they want to start their own project, when I said it's related, it's because when a volunteer like if cleaning the beach, for example, as you were stating, they can sign up as their own VO and become like a sub DAO, right? And then after that, they obtain the same benefits that I just stated right now as a volunteer organization. They have access to these verified volunteers. They're able to communicate and coordinate with other verified parties like corporate entities, right, and donors. So when I was starting a project, right, like the statewide board program, for example, I mentioned, where I registered 650 people to vote. One of my main problems was not that I couldn't find students, right? I mean, I was a student at that time, but I couldn't find anybody to help facilitate that. I couldn't find not only volunteers, I couldn't find donors, people to help me because this costs money, right? And I couldn't find corporate, it was really hard to find corporate entities and get myself in front of these corporate entities, especially with their high hierarchy, to tell them, hey, I'm doing this great project. Can you please sponsor me? But this provides them the ability to get, to actually communicate with these individuals. Now, in relation to the volunteers and how they are rewarded with Devo tokens. Now, and you were talking about the
Just briefly,
non-dilutive.
maybe,
Yeah,
sorry to
I'll
interrupt.
talk briefly. Yeah,
Just briefly to add on to that, it's also like how easy is this process? Like how easy for any civil organization, I mean, not even an organization, initiative to actually get into the system, build a sub DAO and everything.
yeah.
And are you giving some sort of a guidance and the help through that process?
Yeah, we have our whole decentralized application mapped out. And like, basically specifically all the user flows on whether it's how to sign up or how to start a project or how to end a project, or like how a volunteer signs up to a project or how they like quit a project, or any single one of these parties and every single transaction. We have that set up. But one of our main core principles at Divo is to make it as easy as possible for individuals and always never try and complicate something that can be simplified, because we understand the fact that not every stakeholder who joins this protocol, whether you're a donor, a volunteer organization, or a volunteer, not only not understands blockchain, but or is even technically savvy, right? So I hope that answers your question in relation to like but how it will look like, for instance, like a volunteer, right? Or let's say a marginalized individual, right? If a marginalized individual needs help, right? Let's say I'm someone who is like who needs constant volunteer help because I broke my leg, right? And I'm 60 years old, and I need volunteer help. What I'll do is I just go on the application, and I can basically see every single volunteer after being verified that I actually need help. I just search for volunteers to help me out, or I request funding from the DAO and I get my expenses paid. So that's
But
how easy it
you're
is.
not talking about like 60 or plus 60 people getting in contact with a decentralized
Yeah, but that's
app.
the thing though.
How
But
easy is that?
we're trying to, well, that's the thing though. Although it is a decentralized application, we're trying to make it as we're going to make it as easy as possible. We're going to make it as simple as possible. The UI UX portion as simple as
Perfect.
possible for them to understand, right? And which is why even the fact that, and just like to give you an example of how we're trying to make it is currently even their personal identifiers, it goes to their email, right? Through Magic Link. And how that happens is that, they get sent a wallet with an with an ENFT inside of it. And what we're planning on doing in the future is the fact that when they want to receive these funds, instead of having to have like a MetaMask wallet, for instance, we're planning on, one of the things we're planning on doing is making these wallets more secure and possibly allowing these funds to go straight to their email. That's the kind of thinking that we're trying to do. We're trying to be like, okay, we understand that a lot of these individuals don't really understand blockchain, or not even tech savvy. We understand, how can we provide them with this access? And so that's how we're trying to make it as simple as possible, while also remembering the fact that, and what also makes this, what also, makes this project very, very, is going to be very, very successful is also the fact that everybody has access to a cell phone nowadays. You know, like for more people have access to cell phones, they have access to clean water. And so, you know, people are more technically savvy than concede. But the fact is that we still understand that there are individuals who don't understand technology that much. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible. They log on an application, they search for a volunteer, they submit help, and the DAO funds it. That's how easy it is. ABC. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I like that also mass adoption facilitator aspect with the easy to use apps and everything. Obviously, there are a lot to understand in terms of how the person emails can operate in a secure way.
Yeah.
But let's just go pass to the economic aspects. Like, how do we assess as an organizer of any environmental humanitarian cause action, basically, how do I assess the unit of work, the contribution, and like how that the participation to Devo ecosystem as a sub-DAO or a party of it, how that can turn into the economical value, incentivizing the participants of that act, basically.
All right. So if I understand it, just I want to make sure I answer your question correctly. You're asking me how does the basically how the participants in the ecosystem, get rewarded, and how's that facilitated? Is it like basically, is that correct?
Yes, what is it like? I am the person who wants to reward the participants to the cause I'm organizing. Do I need to, like, I don't know, get the $1,000 worth of Divo token to distribute these people, or do they like, are they, once they're validated, is it directly rewarding these participants because of the system's own? So I mean, I want to understand that part.
I understand 100%. So people are rewarded via multiple facets, right? And I'm going to start first and foremost with the reward pools, right? And then I'm going to go for the volunteers who have, a separate way of being rewarded, right? So let me start with the reward pools. With 33% locked in liquidity, what happens is, and with the rebasing mechanism, what happens is these liquidity pools they never decrease. They always keep increasing, due to the fact that a portion of these reward tokens, as appropriated by the DAO founders, will go back into these liquidity pools, thus increasing the size of it, and then increasing the value of the percentage of reward tokens that's coming out of liquidity pools, which then goes to the reward pools, right? And then the DAO founders vote specifically where these rewards go. So does it go to the volunteer? Does it go to a volunteer organization? Does it go back to the DAO founders? So from this instance, the DAO, the parties are rewarded via the rewards that come out of the rewards pool. Now you might be stating, what gives the Devo token value? Like, what would make it valuable? Why would anybody want a Devo token, right? If you don't want to vote. Let's say somebody doesn't care about voting. Well, the fact is that this all goes back to the utility, which is one of the main ways that we separate ourselves from other projects, that we're in the philanthropy space that don't have this utility. Because although people like to help, they also need to see value. And so, all these transactions that happen within the DAO that I just previously said, I felt like you had some context into that, or you're able to look deeper into those when I answered my previous question. They are governed when those transactions happens. There's like a small percentage, basically like a contract interaction that is taken, that is paid via Devo tokens. So what that does is it increases demand. It decreases the supply of Devo tokens within the whole ecosystem, and it increases demand of those tokens. So
is it kind of a burn function of the
no, it's never burns. It never burns. No, they basically, those tokens are taken and they're given back into the liquidity pool.
all right, okay, yeah.
They're taken and they're given back to the liquidity pool.
Yeah,
I'm about to go into the tokenomics right now, a brief, in more depth. But those tokens are taken, they're not burned, they're given back to the liquidity pool, thus the ever increasing. And that's like, other than the reward tokens going back. In addition, and so, as stated previously, one way would be if when a donor who has, staked their donations, right? Which is one of the other things that we allow donors to do. Instead of giving up their principal, they can stake their donations, and that percentage goes to these individuals for a volunteer organization, or a verified volunteer organization, a verified volunteer, or directly to someone who needs help, who's verified marginalized individual. If when they do that, a percentage of Devo tokens will go as a contract fee, similar to a volunteer organization wants to pay a volunteer, a corporate entity want to reach out and sponsor, contract interaction. Although it's very, very nominal, when you look at it through from a bird's eye view from an ecosystem of millions, right? That then becomes very, very significant. Then when you go, so that increases the demand, right? And then decreases the supply, making it more valuable. Now, in relation to the ecosystem transactions, this mainly relates to the corporate entities. Corporate entities, when they are attracted to spaces that have a lot of that, not are going to be attracted to the Devo ecosystem, not only because of the millions of users that are going to be in the ecosystem, such as volunteers and volunteer organizations and donors, but in addition to that, we have to notice that this is a philanthropy DAO, and corporate entities really value their goodwill. Currently, right now, the way that goodwill is performed is that if they want to go sponsor a project, not only do they have to conduct due diligence on that project, but they also have to market they have to also personally market their goodwill efforts. They have to keep putting that press release. But what happens after a year or 2 years? Nobody remembers that. That's why that decreases their motivation in order to do so, right? So now that they have an NFT and their donations are recorded on a specific, like, if they give anything that's recorded on the blockchain, they can then better market that. And then they can also have one thing that we're planning on doing is basically gamifying that. So Samsung and Apple can then compete on who's giving more through a leadership board, gamifying the experience, increasing that goodwill, making more corporate entities want to go into the ecosystem, and then that causes transaction fees, that causes contract interaction fees, and then with more money being donated, that's also contract interaction fees, all facilitated via the Devo token, right? And so the ecosystem fees is if they want to purchase a service, as stated previously, advertising. Now, in relation to the volunteers, right? What happens is the fact that the volunteers are rewarded twofold, right? First and foremost, this is not part of the rewarding. They're given an NFT that verifies that they've done a volunteer service. When they sign up, they get an NFT, that's their identifier. When they will, every time they volunteer, right, that batch of volunteer hours is verified that, hey, I volunteer X amount. They go to university or to the corporate entity they want to apply. Hey, here's the number of hours I've volunteered for. Now, in relation to the value of the reward, is the fact that they are rewarded via a sub token and the Divo token. So the sub token is once that decentralized application has verified that they volunteered, right? And Oracle takes that information, puts it to a smart contract, and that smart contract, in addition to minting an NFT, mints a Devo sub token, which is basically provided to these volunteers, right? In addition to the fact, this smart contract also allocates some Devo token on a per hour basis, right, from the liquidity pools to these Devo, to these volunteers. So it's kind of like, as stated previously, kind of like, what in the basic potential model, how corporations, people who want to advertise, they have to basically buy BAT part of the ecosystem, and then individuals who watch those advertisements, they get rewarded via BAT. That's kind of like the same system, but if you want to look at percentages, most of their tokens will come from the sub token that's specifically minted. And then what gives that value is the utility. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. But the one thing to note is that so the way let's say,
you want rebates?
reward the participants is not going to be it's not going to depend on the value of the actual Devo token, but our own collective contribution to the sub token value, basically, which is a little bit harder to create that effort to increase the value of the of each volunteer So that part is going to be like, for that to be an economic reward for each participant, it needs to, because it's not, I mean, for an NGO, for an organizational structure, it makes total sense because it's eventually a governance token. So like needed to be separated. But I think the volunteering validation NFTs has like the biggest value, and then sub-token value, it depends on how much value that organization can generate with its participant, right?
100%. And it's the fact that, yeah, obviously, like the DAO governance token, that's on the voting mechanism, but you're 100% right. Now, I just want to, also clarify the fact that, these sub tokens, we are aiming on to providing it with value. Now, in relation to, what specific utilities from this ecosystem this sub token will be utilized for, right? I mean, I can walk you through it step by step, but there are going to be certain utilities associated with that sub token. In addition to the fact, this sub token is going to be representative of their value, of their hard work value, right? And so, that will also have a lot of goodwill value for them. And so what we're aiming on in the future is that partnering with these corporate entities in order for them to provide rewards from their side to volunteers who have volunteered, and utilizing that sub token to kind of facilitate that transaction. So, I'm just going to throw an example. Like, McDonald's could say, for instance, like, pay 5 Divo sub tokens and get like an ice cream, for instance, right? That's the example I'm trying to do. So the value of the sub token is not only the specific utility that's associated with it, but in addition to that, it's also the fact that it represents goodwill.
Also, I think the value of the token in that sense, if I want to, as an organization, for instance, I can always buy that much of Divo token and distribute that as as a reward of the volunteer participation, instead of generating my own sub token, right?
Yeah. So I mean, so volunteer organizations, when they submit like basically a project on the DAO, and they're looking for volunteers, they have the option, and this is in our decentralized application kind of roadmap and technical requirements, is that they can personally fund these volunteer hours in addition to the in addition to the sub token that's automatically generated. They can also put some Devo, they can also fund the hours with Devo tokens, right? Which also increases that value.
Okay, so sub token is automatically generated even if I don't want that or anything. Yeah, all right. So let's go to like, finally, it's like, I mean, it was because it is so fun, so much fun to discuss these things, and it's a very well thought project. So we just go deep and deep down to the rabbit hole. But let's just wrap it up with the governance side. I have a couple of questions on that. So basically, is voting on chain, or is it happening on the site, on social media platforms or anything like with the discussions? And also, is it so? Because I mean, one thing that is super nice about it, the instead of any proof of stake protocol, it basically, if you join to different volunteering acts, you eventually gather enough voting rights, or more voting rights proportional to the volunteerism, or as an organization, if you get people rewarded by your own Divo allocation. I want to ask how. So you mentioned the unique NFT ID basically as a like Sybil attack resistance, right? So what's the protocol that can that can resist to the multiple account validation and in terms of governance, and also like what is going to be relevant for the Divo token holders to vote on the ecosystem? Like what's the what do you think that's the scope of? Is it the development or like more like the social causes and all that? For instance, I mean, if you can, it's the DAO, you cannot foresee, but it's like how do you anticipate it to be? And yeah, like the counting, or like for instance, if what's the process of any proposal to pass, and what's the requirement for voting and all that?
100%. So first and foremost, I'm going to start, because I know you mentioned this previously also, and I forgot, but I feel like it's kind of tied, the rebasing, correct? Non-dilutive rebasing, elastic rebasing. So as previously stated, the number of tokens basically increase and decrease, and this is determined by an oracle based on multiple different factors, one of them being, for example, like demand of the token. And what non-dilutive rebasing means is like that even though it increases and decreases, your percentage of Divo tokens is not diluted. So if I have 1% of the tokens, which initially at point A was 100 tokens, right? And at point B increased to 200 tokens, I still own 1%. Same thing as, if it was 100 tokens, it decreased to 50 tokens, it's still 1%. Now in relation to specifically, I wanted to also mention with that is the fact that the long-term liquidity pool. So, when it's 33% staked, what's going to happen over time is that these 33% is going to go back to the community, right? Basically, when there's positive and negative rebasing, that kind of ultimately goes and funnels down back into the reward pools, which are then simultaneously rewarded back to the ecosystem participants, which the DAO founders vote on where specifically that goes. So the DAO founders,
just to make it clear, so just
yes,
because you're not burning any token, the percentage of anyone's holding is not changing in the whole supply. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
it
But
does not change.
what about newly minted tokens?
Yeah, newly minted. Yeah. So there's first and foremost, and there's a non-dilution clause, and Isaac can speak more about this because he was basically he was the one that forefront of this. There's a non-dilution. No new tokens are minted. Like 600 million is the maximum minted within the smart contract. No new tokens can be minted. Now, the tokens that are minted are the Divo subtokens, right? Those are the tokens that are minted. But in terms of the governance token, no, there are no new tokens.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. So basically, the amount of Divo tokens increases and decreases in order to try and help and facilitate these contract interactions. Because if the number of tokens stays 600 million, and then you have 500 million people on the protocol, and they're all conducting transactions, you're going to have a token that is, it's going to be very hard to kind of facilitate. It's going to be very hard to be utilized to facilitate interactions with that, right? So that's one of the purposes of the rebasing. In addition to the fact that since it's 33% locked, ultimately what's going to happen is those 33% is going to be funneled down back into the reward pools over time without this liquidity pool decreasing in size, right? By an oracle. So so ultimately that 33% will go back to the reward pool and will go back into the community, right? So I hope that answers your question about the specific rebasing mechanisms. Now, in relation to the DAO, where is it on? Yes, right now it's on chain, it's on Ethereum, and they can vote via snapshot governance. And actually, what's cool is the fact that our team, in order to we started acting from once the DAO was established, that's when we started utilizing it. So most of our large decisions are taken via vote, and that's done through somebody. For example, I actually did it last week where I wanted to start a new initiative, basically saying that I want to start a certain portion of the utility a bit early, and I put a proposal via on Snapshot on the DAO, and all users voted on it, and it basically the way we have it set up right now is 51% have to accept it. But the DAO founders, but that's not set. That's just a proposed metric. Ultimately, the DAO founders are going to be the ones that either accept or deny this percentage. So a lot of you could call it the governance of the DAO, initially after we launch IEO is going to be given as proposals. And the DAO founders are going to have to accept and deny that, right? So it's not like that we're predisposing on them set conditions that they have to follow. No, we are saying, hey,
Okay, so
yes.
they're like, it's more liberal on that side.
Yeah,
But
no,
what
of
about
course.
the participation? Usually in DAOs, the participation is the biggest problem,
Mhm.
right? So how many but that can be also liberal in terms of when they can decide their own governance, which is actually super cool, because eventually if it's an organization, you would like to, I mean, you would know the people, if like how many of those are like on an executive level, or how many are like what decision is relevant for how many people in that sub DAO basically. But just to assess, like, I mean, just to understand how to is there any incentivizing mechanism for participation and everything, basically, to encourage the participation?
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify this, we what is like a DAO has to be decentralized. Like we try as much as possible. What basically what Devo was trying to do is provide when we go on high initial exchange offering, which is the third round, we want to provide the community this value ecosystem which will redefine volunteerism. But we are trying not to tell them how to run this ecosystem. That you know that direction has to be done by the DAO, right? By the centralized autonomous organization. Otherwise, that's not a DAO. You might as well just get centralized management. Then what a DAO is decentralized autonomous organization with no centralized management, no board of directors, right?
But
So
how does it
that's
work for Divo specifically as a
yeah.
DAO?
So for
Like, I
Devo,
mean,
yeah. But
specifically-
I just wanted to restate that because even our
yeah,
goal,
sure, sure.
like even our goal, right? Our overall DAO goal, if you look on the website, in brackets right after it, it says, until voted on by DAO. So even our goal is that's because we are giving power back to the people. We can't give power back to the people if we retain some of that power. Now, in relation to like their why they want to vote. Now, obviously, we're not going to be oblivious to the fact that some people just don't really want to vote, right? And that's all right. But one of the main reasons why they will vote is twofold. One, because one of the major things they're voting on is where exactly these reward tokens are going, right? So, if they are very passionate about these reward tokens going for a certain organization that they care about, for instance, if I really care about X organization that's doing such great things for the environment, they're on the DAO, they're trying to start this new initiative that I'm really passionate about, I would want to vote on that money going there, right? Or, right, if I am a DAO founder who thinks that, yes, I want to donate to this volunteer organization, but also I want to maybe increase the percentage that's going for the long-term operations of the DAO, I would want to vote on that, right? Or a DAO founder is like, you know what, we also need the wants to ensure that the percentage for the DAO founders stays consistent, they also go vote on that. So it depends on where they think that these reward tokens, these rewards should go, and exactly where these rewards should go. Now, in addition to that, that's just one functionality. What makes this project beautiful is the fact that it's ever expansive to where there's literally no limitations to the kind of initiatives that can be created, right? So, I think I gave this quick example. If, Devo protocol wanted to wanted to create NFTs and, give 90% of those proceeds to charity and obtain 10%, right, of the proceeds back to the liquidity pool. Um, in order to set that initiative, they would have to go vote on this proposal, right? If they want to add 3, 4, 5 more utilities to the protocol, they have to vote on that proposal. And so if you don't vote on that proposal, then you don't have your voice heard. It's the same instance as, the shareholder voting in normal corporations, right? That has been going on for, for the longest of times, right? Your reason why, and the whole thing goes back to the fact that the reason why they would vote is the fact that one, they have passion for what they're voting for, and two, for the fact that what they're voting for is basically going to provide, the whole ecosystem is going to basically help push the ecosystem forward, which will ultimately increase the utility of their token, right? And which will ultimately, at the end of the day, increase the value of their Devo token.
Okay, perfect. If Isaac has final comments on any of these, we can get that. And I think I would love to go on, but we can have the second session. But that was pretty comprehensive, I think. Thank you so much, Hamdee. It's a really well thought and structured project, and I'm going to also like write these down, and you can add that so we can actually like get all the impact factors and how do you tackle these questions into one document and share it with the community. Isaac, do you have final comments on any of the issues we discussed?
That looks like, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I can go for that. Like if you would like me just to give a closer. Ultimately, this project aims to ultimately this project is special due to the fact that not only does it aim to abolish many of the inefficiencies that plague the volunteer realm, but also does it in a way that provides value to its participants. Every single industry that exists out there has been excelling, right? The previous inefficiencies that have been plaguing that sector have been solved because there is value being provided to those individuals who solve those problems, right? But unfortunately, with the philanthropy sector, these inefficiencies stay existed because there is no motivation from individuals who have the knowledge in order to solve these inefficiencies, There's no motivation. People like to help other people. That is understandable. But people also, whether they consciously or subconsciously, one of the main factors, they need value. And that's what separates us. What we do is that we solve these inefficiencies by providing value using complex blockchain technology. And we utilize blockchain technology for its intended purposes of trying to excel humanity and benefit humanity in ways that were not possible before.
And also you are providing the infrastructure for anyone who would like to use this technology with the presets voting and rewarding system, which is the actual, which is also the value to contribute this whole ecosystem you're also trying to make to build. That's the part.
One of the things it's awesome that you mentioned that, is because one of the things that we wanted to do with the DAO is, we got the question of, how about if 2 years, 3 years later, another volunteer, another project comes up that basically takes a lot of your open source information and tries to create something. We said, great, let them do it. Because the way we built up this DAO is the fact that for these individuals, not to compete with them, but to join under and utilize our ecosystem. But when you utilize your ecosystem, they're going to be utilizing what to facilitate that. They're going to be utilizing the DAO tokens to facilitate these trustless interactions, to facilitate these interactions, which increases the value of the value of these tokens. So they join the ecosystem, they utilize every single thing, but that increases the value and the utilization and the utility of the Devo token. So we are here not to compete with each other. We are here to redefine volunteerism by working collaboratively, but by utilizing also blockchain technology to provide value to this ecosystem.
That's perfect. That's the whole idea of pollination network instead of rivalry. Basically by contributing to each other's success, contributing to the quality of the sector with the peer-to-peer reviews and support system. I think eventually all the profit, all the value generated is going to be distributed to these contributors of each other's success, basically. So I'm super happy that we are all aligned, and we're gonna have a couple of more sessions on that. Thank you so much, Isaac, and Hamdee, sorry. So it's pretty late there. Thank you for
Yeah,
late time
like
contribution.
oh, it's 2:30. Oh wow, it's gonna be fun waking up
Oh
tomorrow.
God. It was a great session. Thank you so much, Hamdee. Thank you so much. We're gonna